Letters from a Living Dead Man by Elsa Barker. Read for you by BlueFriend in beautiful BC. Part 6. Letter 30. The Sylph and the Magician. If your eyes could pierce the veil of matter, and you could see what goes on in the tenuous world around and above that city of Paris, you would gasp with wonder. I have spent much time in Paris lately. Shall I tell you of some of the strange things I've seen? In a street on the left bank of the river, called the Rue de Vaugirard, there lives a man of middle age and sedentary habits who's a sort of magician. He is constantly attended and served by one of the elemental spirits known as sylphs. This sylph he calls Mariline. I do not know from what language he got the name, for he seems to speak several and to know Hebrew. I've seen this Mariline coming and going to and from his apartment. No, it would not be right for me to tell you where it is. The man could be identified, though the sylph would elude the census taker. Mariline does not make his bed or cook his broth, for which humble service he has a charwoman, but the sylph runs errands and discovers things for him. He's a book collector of old books and manuscripts, and many of his treasures have been located by Mariline in the stalls which lie along the banks of the Seine, and also in more pretentious bookshops. This man is not a devil worshipper. He's only a harmless enthusiast, fond of occult things, and striving to pierce the veil which shuts the elemental world from his eyes. A little less brandy and wine, and he might be able to see clearly, for he is a true student. But he's fond of the flesh, and it preys upon the spirit. One day I encountered Mariline going upon one of his errands, and I introduced myself by signaling with my hands and calling my name. This attracted the attention of the sprite, who came and stood by me. "Where are you going?" I asked, and she nodded towards the other side of the river. The thought came to me that perhaps I ought not to question this servant of the good magician as to her master's business, so I hesitated. She also hesitated, and then she said, "But he's interested in the spirits of men." Well, this made the matter simpler, and I asked, "You do his errands?" "Yes, always." "Why do you do his errands?" "Because I love to serve him." "Why do you love to serve him?" "Because I belong to him." "I thought every soul belonged to itself." "But I am not a soul." "Well, then what are you?" "A sylph." "Do you ever expect to be a soul?" "Oh, yes. He's promised that I shall be if I serve him faithfully." "But how can he make you a soul?" "I don't know, but he will." "How do you know that he will?" "Because I trust him." "What makes you trust him?" "Because he trusts me." "And you always tell him the truth?" "Always." "Who taught you what truth is?" "He did." "How?" Well, this seemed to puzzle the being before me, and I feared she would go away, so I detained her by saying quickly, I do not want to worry you with questions which you cannot answer. Tell me how you first came into his service." "Ought I?" "Ah, so you have a conscience." "Yes, he taught me to have." "But you say that he is interested in the spirits of men." "Yes, and I also know good spirits from bad ones." "Did he teach you that?" "No." "How did you learn?" "I always knew." "Then you have lived a long time?" "Oh, yes." "And when do you expect to have or to become a soul?" "When he comes out here into this world where we are." This staggered me by its daring. Had the good magician been deceiving his self, or did he really believe what he promised? "What did he say about it?" I asked. "That if I would serve him now, he would serve me later." "And how is he going to do it?" "I don't know." "Suppose you ask him?" "I never ask questions, I answer them." "For instance, what sort of questions?" "I tell him where such and such a person is, and what he or she is doing." "Can you tell him what these people are thinking?" "Not often, not always. Sometimes I can." "How can you tell?" "By the feel of them. If I am warm in their presence, I know they're friendly to him. If I'm cold, I know they are his enemies. If I feel nothing at all, then I know they are not thinking of him, or they are indifferent." "And your errand this evening?" "To see a lady." "And you're not jealous?" "What is jealous?" "You are not displeased that he should interest himself in ladies?" "Why should I be?" This was a question I could not answer, not knowing the nature of sylphs. She surprised me a little, for I had supposed that all female things were jealous. But fearing again that she might leave me, I hurried to question her further. "How did you make his acquaintance?" I asked. "He called me." "How?" "By the incantation." "What incantation?" "The call of the sylphs." "Oh," I said, "he called the sylphs and you came." "Yes, of course. I liked him for his kindness, and I made him see me." "How did you manage it?" "I dazzled his eyes until he closed them, and then he could see me." "Can he always see you now?" "No, but he knows I'm there." "He can see you sometimes still?" "Oh, yes, often." "And when he saw you first?" "He was delighted, and called me loving names and made me promises." "The promise of a soul that first time?" "Yes." "Then you had wanted to have a soul?" "Oh, yes." "But why?" "Many of us want to be men. We love men, that is, most of us do." "Why do you love men?" "It's our nature." "But not the nature of all of you?" "There are malignant spirits of the air." "And what will you do when you have a soul?" "I will take a body and live on earth." "And leave your friend whom you now serve?" "Oh, no. It is to be with him that I specially want a body." "Then will he come back to the earth with you?" "He says so." This again staggered me. I was becoming interested in this magician. He had a daring imagination. Could a spirit of the air develop into a human soul? I asked myself. Was this man self-deceived? Or again, was he deceiving his lovely messenger? I thought a little too long this time, for when I turned again to speak to my strange companion, she had left me. I tried to follow, but could not find her, and if she returned soon, it must have been by some other road. Though I looked in all directions, she was invisible to me. Now, the question will arise in your mind, in what language did I talk with this aerial servant of a French magician? I seemed to speak in my own tongue, and she seemed to respond in the same. How is that? I cannot say, unless we really use the subtle language of thought itself. You may often, on meeting with a person whose language you do not speak, feel an interchange of ideas by the look of the eyes, by the expression of the face, by gestures. Now imagine that intensified 100-fold. Might it not extend to the simple questions and answers which I exchanged with the sylph? I do not say that it would, but I think it might. For, as I said before, I seemed to speak and she seemed to reply in my own language. What strange experiences one has out here! I rather dread to go back into the world, where it will be so dull for me for a long time. Can I exchange this freedom and vivid life for a long period of somnolence? Afterwards to suck a bottle and learn the multiplication table and Greek and Latin verbs? I suppose I must, but not yet. Good night. Letter 31. A problem in celestial mathematics. By the vividness with which you feel my presence at times, you can judge of the intensity of the life that I am living. I am no pallid spook dripping with grave dew. I am real, and quite as wholesome, or so it seems to me, as when I walked the earth in a more or less unhealthy body. The ghastly spectres, when they return, do not talk as I talk. Ask those who have seen and heard them. It is well that you have kept yourself comparatively free of communications from the other world. It would have been amazing had you been afraid of me, but there are those who would be if they should sense my presence as you sense it. One night I knocked at the door of a friend's chamber, half expecting a welcome. He jumped out of bed in alarm, then jumped back again and pulled the blanket over his head. He was really afraid that it might be I. So, as I do not wish to be responsible for a case of heart failure, or for a shock of hair which, like that in the old song, turned white in a single night, I went quietly away. Doubtless he persuaded himself the next day that there were mice in the wainscoting. Had you been afraid of me, though, I should have been ashamed of you, for you know better. Most persons do not. It's a real pleasure for me to come back and talk with you sometimes. There are no friends like the old friends, and the society of sylphs and spirits would never quite satisfy me if all those whom I had known and loved should turn their backs on me. Speaking of sylphs, I met the teacher last night and asked him if that French magician I told you about could really make good his promise to his aerial companion and help her to acquire the kind of soul essential to incarnation on earth as a woman, and his answer was no. Of course, I asked him why, and he answered that the elemental creatures, or units of force inhabiting the elements, as we use that term, could not, during this life cycle, step out of their element into the human. Can they ever do so? I asked. I do not know, he replied, but I believe that all the less evolved units around the earth are working in the direction of man, that the human is a stage of development which they will all reach someday, but not in this life cycle. I asked the teacher if he knew the magician in question, and he answered that he had known him for 1,000 years, that long ago, in a former life, the Paris magician had placed his feet upon the path which leads to power, but that he had been sidetracked by the desire for selfish pleasures, and that he might wander a long time before he found his way back to real and philosophical truth. Is he to be blamed or pitied? I asked. Pity cuts no figure in the problem, the teacher replied. A man seeks what he desires. After the teacher went away, I began asking myself questions. What was I seeking? What did I desire? The answer came quickly. Knowledge. A year ago I might have answered power, but knowledge is the forerunner of power. If I get true knowledge, I shall have power enough. It is because I want to give to you, and possibly to others, a few scraps of knowledge which might be inaccessible to you by any other means, that I am coming back, and coming back time after time to talk with you. The greatest bit of knowledge that I have to offer you is this: that by the exercise of will a man can retain his objective consciousness after death. Many persons out here sink into a sort of subjective bliss, which makes them indifferent as to what is going on upon the earth or in the heavens. I could do so myself easily. As I believe I've said before, while man on earth has both subjective and objective consciousness, but functions mostly in the objective, out here he has still subjective and objective consciousness, but the tendency is towards the subjective. At almost any time, on composing yourself and looking in, you can fall into a state of subjective bliss, which is similar to that enjoyed by souls on this side of the dividing line we call death. In fact, it is by such subconscious experience that man has learned nearly all he knows regarding the etheric world. When the storms and passions of the body are stilled, man can catch a glimpse of his own interior life, and that interior life is the life of this fourth dimensional plane. Please do not accuse me of contradicting myself or of being obscure. I have said that the objective consciousness is as possible with us as the subjective is with you, but that the tendency is merely the other way. You may remember a pair of lovers about whom I wrote you a few weeks ago. He had been out here some time and had waited for her and helped her over the uncertain marshlands which lie between the two states of existence. I saw these lovers again the other day, but they were not at all excited by my appearance. On the contrary, I fancy that I put them out somewhat by awakening them, by calling them back from the state of subjective bliss into which they have sunk since being together at last. While he waited for her all those years, he kept himself awake by expectation. While still on earth, she was always thinking of him out here, and so the polarity was sustained. Now they have each other. They are in the little home which he built for her with so much pleasure out of the tenuous materials of this tenuous world. They see each other's faces whether they look out or in. They are content. They have nothing more to attain, or so they tell each other, and they consequently sink back into the arms of subjective bliss. Now this state of bliss, of rumination, they have a right to enjoy. No one can take it from them. They have earned it by activity in the world and elsewhere. It is theirs by rhythmic justice. They will enjoy it, I fancy, for a long time, living over the past experiences which they've had together and apart. Then some day one or the other of them will become surfeited with too much sweetness. The muscles of his or her soul will stretch for want of exercise. He or she will give a spiritual yawn and by the law of reaction pass out, not to return. Where will he or she go, you ask? Why, back to the earth, of course. Let us imagine him or her awakening from that subjective state of bliss which is known to them as attainment, and going for a short promenade in blessed and wholesome solitude. Then, with a sort of morning alertness in the heart and the eye, he or she draws near to a pair of earthly lovers. Suddenly the call of matter, the eager, terrible call of blood and warmth, of activity raised to the nth power, catches the half-awakened soul on the ethereal side of matter, and he has again entered the world of material formation. He is sunk and hidden in the flesh of earth. He awaits birth. He will come out with great force by reason of his former rest. He might even become a captain of industry if he's a strong unit. But I began by saying he or she. Let me change the figure. The man would be almost certain to awaken first by reason of his positive polarity. Now, in drawing this imaginary picture of my lovers, I'm not making a dogma of the way in which all souls return to earth. I'm merely guessing how these two will return, for she would probably follow him speedily when she awoke and found herself alone. And the reason why I fancy they will return in that way is because they are indulging themselves in too much subjective bliss. When will they go back? I cannot say. Perhaps next year, perhaps in 100 years. Not knowing the numerical value of their unit of force, I cannot guess how much subjective bliss they can endure without a violent reaction. I'm sure that you're wondering if someday I shall myself sink into that state of bliss which I have described. Perhaps. I should enjoy it, but not for long, and not yet. However, I have no sweetheart out here to enjoy it with me. Letter 32. A change of focus. With the guidance of the teacher during the last few weeks, I have been going to and fro in the earth and walking up and down in it. You smile at the veiled reference, but have not certain friends of yours actually feared me, as if I were the devil of the book of Job? Now, to be serious, I have been visiting those lands and cities where in former lives I lived and worked among men. One of the many advantages of travel is that it helps a man to remember his former existences. There's certainly a magic in places. I've been in Egypt, in India, Persia, in Spain, in Italy. I've been in Germany, Switzerland, Austria, Greece, Turkey, and many other lands. The Dardanelles were not closed to me recently, when, by reason of the war, you could not have passed through. There are advantages to almost every condition, even my present one, for the law of compensation holds good. In certain lives of the past, I was a wide traveler. Now you may wonder how it is that I pass easily from this world to yours, seeing into both. But you must remember that your world and mine occupy about the same space, that the plane of the earth's surface is one of the lower and more material planes of our world, using the word plane as you would use the word layer. As I've said before, there are also places accessible to us which lie at some distance above the earth's surface. Mansions in the skies are more than figurative. I have only slightly to change my focus at any time to find myself in your world. That I cannot be seen there with the naked eye is no proof that I am not there. Without that change of focus, which is done through an action of will and by knowing the method, I might even be occupying the same space as something in your world and not know it. Note well this point, for it is only half of something which I have to say. The other half is that you also may at any time be, so far as space is concerned, in the immediate neighborhood of interesting things in our world, and not know that you are there. But if you focus to this world, you are more or less conscious of it. So when I, knowing how, focus to your world, I am there in consciousness and can enjoy the varied sights of many cities, the changing aspects of many lands. When I first came out, I could not see my way about the earth very well, but now I can see better. No, I'm not going to give you a formula to give to other people by which you or they could change focus at will and enter into relation with this world, because such knowledge at the present stage of human progress would do more harm than good. I merely state the fact and leave the application for those who have the curiosity and the ability to demonstrate it. My object in writing these letters is primarily to convince a few persons, to strengthen their certainty in the fact of immortality, or the survival of the soul after the bodily change which is called death. Many think they believe, who are not certain whether they do believe or not. If I can make my presence as a living and vital entity felt in these letters, it will have the effect of strengthening the belief of certain persons in the doctrine of immortality. This is a materialistic age. A large percentage of men and women have no real interest in life beyond the grave. But they will all have to come out here sooner or later, and perhaps a few will find the change easier, the journey less formidable, by reason of what I shall have taught them. Is it not worth while? Is it not worth a little effort on your part as well as mine? Any person approaching the great change who shall seriously study these letters and lay their principles to heart, and who shall will to remember them after passing out, need not fear anything. We all fail in much that we undertake, but I hope I shall not fail in this. Do not you fail on your side. I could not do this work without you, nor could you do it without me. That is in answer to the supposition that I am your subconscious mind. I have been in Constantinople, and have stood in the very room where I once had a remarkable experience, hundreds of years ago. I have seen the walls, I've touched them. I've read the etheric records of their history and my own history in connection therewith. I have walked the rose gardens of Persia and have smelled the flowers, the grandchildren hundreds of times removed, of those roses whose fragrance was an ecstasy to me when, watching with the bulbul, I paced therein another form, and with intentions different to mine now. It was the perfume of the roses which made me remember. In Greece also I have lived over the old days. Before their degeneration began, what a race they were! I think that concentration was the secret of their power. The ether around that peninsula is written over with their exploits in daring thought as well as daring action. The old etheric records are so vivid that they shine through the later writings. For you must know that what are called astral records lie, layer against layer, everywhere. We read one layer instead of another, either by affinity or by will. It is no more strange than that a man may go among the millions of volumes in the British Museum and select the one he wants. The most marvelous things are always simple of explanation, if one has the key to unlock their secret. There has been much nonsense written about vibration, but nevertheless truth lies thereabouts. Where there is so much smoke, there must be fire. In India I have met with yogis in meditation. Do you know why their peculiar way of breathing produces psychic results? No, you do not. Now let me tell you. By holding the breath long, a certain, shall I say, poison is produced in the body, which poison, acting on the psychic nature, changes the vibration. That's all. Volumes have been written about yoga, but have any of them said that? The untrained, healthy lungs in the ordinary operation get rid of this poison by processes well known to physiologists, that is, in the natural man, adjusted to and working contentedly on the material plane. But in order for a man still living on the material plane to become adjusted to the psychic world, a change of vibration is necessary. This change of vibration may be produced by a slight overdose of the above-mentioned poison. Is it dangerous? Well, yes, to the ignorant. To those who are learned in its use, it is no more dangerous than most of the drugs in the pharmacopoeia. Another time, I will tell you about other secrets which I have discovered going to and fro in the earth and walking up and down in it. Letter 33. 5 Resolutions. I have stood at night on the roof of an oriental palace and watched the stars. You who can see into the invisible world by changing your focus can easily understand how I, by reverse process, can see into the world of dense matter. Yes, it's the same thing, only turned the other way. I stood on the roof of an oriental palace and watched the stars. No mortal was near me. Looking down upon the sleeping city, I have seen the cloud of souls which keep watch above it, have seen the messengers coming and going. Once or twice a wan, half-frightened face appeared among the cloud of spirits, and I knew that down below in the city someone had died. But I had seen so many spirits since coming out here that I was more interested in watching the stars. I used to love them, and I love them still. Some day, if it is permitted, I hope to know more about them. But I shall not leave the neighborhood of the earth until these letters are finished. From the distance of the planet Jupiter, I might not be able to write at all. It is true that one can come and go, almost with the quickness of thought, but something tells me that it's better to postpone for a time my more extensive traveling. Perhaps when I get out there, I shall not want to come back for a long time. It means much to me, this correspondence with Earth. During my illness, I used to wonder if I could come back sometimes, but I never imagined anything like this. I would not have supposed it possible to find any well-balanced and responsible person with daring enough to join me in the experiment. I could not have written through the hand of a person of untrained mind unless he or she had been fully hypnotized. I could not have written through the hand of the average intellectual person, because such persons cannot make themselves sufficiently passive. Be at peace. You are not a spirit medium, using the word as it is commonly used, signifying a passive instrument, an aeolian harp set in an aperture between the two worlds and played upon by any wind that blows, except as illustrating the fact that it can be done. There is no great object in my telling you of the things I've seen in your world since coming to this other one. The next time you look out into this plane of life and see the wonderful landscapes and the people, remember that it is in a similar way that I look back into your plane of existence. It is interesting to live in two worlds, going back and forth at will. But when I go into yours, it is only as a visitor, and I shall never attempt to take a hand in its government. There is such a rigorous custom house on the frontier between the two worlds that the traveler, back and forth, cannot afford to carry anything with him, not even a prejudice. If you should come out here with a determination to see only certain things, you might give a wrong value to what you would see. Many have come out here at death with that mental attitude, and so have learned little or nothing. It is the traveler with the open mind who makes discoveries. I brought over with me only a few resolutions: to preserve my identity, to hold my memory of earth life, and to carry back the memory of this life when I should return to the world, to see the great teachers, to recover the memories of my past incarnations, and to lay the necessary foundations for a great earth life when I should go back next time. That sounds simple, does it not? Already I have done much besides, but if I had not borne these points in mind, I might have accomplished little. The only really sad thing about death is that the average man learns so little from it. Only my realization of the fact that the chain of earth lives is relatively endless could keep me from regret that most persons make so little progress in each life. But I comfort myself with the assurance that there is no hurry, that the pearls in the chain of existence, though small, are all in their inevitable places, and that the chain is a circle, the symbol of eternity. And it seems to me, with my still finite view, that most men on this side waste their lives even as they do on your side. That shows how far I am yet from the ideal knowledge. Viewed from the stars, whence I hope some day to view them, all these flat stretches in the landscape of life may be softened by distance, and the whole picture may take on a perspective of beauty which I had not dreamed of while I myself was but a speck upon the canvas. End of part 6.